It's me. Hi, I'm the problem. It's me. I haven't made a video in like 2 months, and that's for quite a few reasons, but they all sort of fall under the umbrella of the fact that BookTube quite right now is not working for me anymore. Now, this does not mean that I want to leave the platform indefinitely. I am nowhere near making that decision as yet. But over the next year, I do think that I will have to take a break, and I don't really plan on uploading any much videos within that time. The first reason why is because I'm frankly too busy right now. I'm in the final year of my master's thesis, and I have a lot to do in a concerningly short amount of time. Is concerningly a word? I don't think it is. We can make things up, language evolves, right? I'm in the midst of intense reading and writing. I have to fix like my preliminary chapters, and on top of that, I'm trying to apply for approval from the ethics committee to start data collection really soon, which I should have started by now. And then I have to do all the analysis shit, and I have to do all of that before September next year. That is a lot to do within less than a year. On top of that, I'm balancing doing this full-time master's with a new part-time job, and that's been really interesting as well. I'm super grateful for all of these wonderful opportunities. Don't get me wrong, I'm not complaining about how busy my life is, right? It's good to be booked and blessed and busy. But it just means that I don't really have the intellectual energy that it requires for me to invest in my videos. I know that you don't have to put an insane amount of effort into BookTube videos in order to create good content on this platform, but for me to make content that really satisfies me, it requires a certain level of effort. A level of effort that I don't really have the spoons to keep up. And that kind of bleeds into the second reason why I'm taking a break. I put too much pressure on myself to make these videos, and my video making is so intertwined with my reading life such that I think that my reading kind of depends on it. I've been doing BookTube for 7 years, and I've been a consistent reader for 8. So really for the majority of my reading life, BookTube has been there. In fact, BookTube is kind of what got me into reading. So in that first year of reading, I was not really making BookTube videos, but I was watching a lot of BookTube. It comes to the point where I find that I am putting so much pressure on my reading life to nourish my BookTube life so that I can catalog the books on my various bookish platforms and whatnot. I just feel like I want to rekindle my love for reading outside of that pressure, and the pressure in general to make videos and to make good videos, and then to worry about whether my videos will get the views or not, because let's be honest, my channel, even though it's grown quite a bit over the last year, I have not really gained much of a greater viewership. In fact, my past few videos have, I've been struggling to cross 1,000 views on my past few videos. And I know you're supposed to say that it's not about the views, it's about, the qualitative feedback. And so long as there's one person who is touched by your content, and that's all that matters. Bullshit! Bullshit, Vivian! Bullshit! I am an attention whore, and I want people to watch my videos. I want lots of views, and it's okay to want that. It's okay to want that, because that's why many people do this. They do this so that they can get the feedback, they can, have the validation of people liking their content. But in order for me to do that, I kind of have to switch up my content. I have to be smart about the kind of videos that I post. People really like when I do discussion videos, which I appreciate that people like when I, sit down and, rant about my opinion on something for like 10 minutes, but it's not very sustainable because there's not a lot of things to discuss half the time. Like when you discuss all of the things, what do you discuss after that? And as of recent, I have not really been keeping up with what's going on in the book community and all of the discourse and whatnot. So it's just like, I don't know what type of videos I can make to grow my audience. I need to sort of like look at what other people are doing and maybe build off of that and add my own spin to it and really kind of figure out what my niche is on this platform. Like that's kind of what I need to work on doing, but I just don't, again, going back to what I said before, I just don't have the time or the energy for that. So I have to wait until I finish this damn degree, and then I feel like I can really invest the time into making the type of content that I want to make and that I feel like my audience or wider audiences would want to see. Going back to what I said about not keeping up with like the online bookish community anymore, that sort of bleeds into the third reason why I haven't really been making videos, and that's because I've been super disconnected with BookTube. I don't watch a lot of BookTube anymore. In fact, I can't remember the last time I watched a full-length BookTube video. I'm just not really interested in this content right now. And it's not because I feel like I've moved on from it or I've outgrown it. I just don't really care for it right now. It's not where I want to be. Every time I see people upload a video, it's not that I don't want to watch it, but it's like, oh gosh, they had the time to read 10 books this month and they're talking about the books, and I'm over here struggling to finish a book that I started in June. In addition to that, sometimes I just feel disconnected with like readers and what they're reading and what's popular. This kind of goes back to like, sort of figuring out what I want to do in terms of gaining a wider audience. And one of my biggest struggles is that I don't like to read the shit most of y'all bitches are reading. A lot of these romance books that have been taking over the internet, I'm just not interested in. Lots of people love their science fiction and fantasy. Lots of people love their YA. In general, genre fiction is kind of like the mainstay of BookTube. Like, people love their genre fiction, and that's great. I don't have a problem with that. But I have been really dipping my toe into the literary fiction side of things as of recent, and I just don't really feel like what I'm interested in reading is what audiences are interested in hearing about. Now, don't get me wrong, there is the literary fiction BookTube community and whatnot, and that's great. So there is like, a niche for me there. But even within that, there's a hierarchy of what books are kind of prioritized. If you're not reading the fucking Booker books or the Women's Prize books or the Pulitzer Prize books or all of these books that are nominated for awards, you're not going to get as much people paying attention to you. A lot of the literary books that I like to read are, yes, the ones that come from those awards and whatnot, but also I really enjoy a good obscure book that I just find and that I'm interested in talking about. But a lot of the time, people are just not interested in hearing about it. And these are just things that I feel, obviously, like that isn't necessarily reflective of the actual reality, but I feel like if I take a break, and I kind of step back and I sort of rethink and reorient my mind on, okay, what it is I really want to do. What do I actually want to read? What type of content do I actually want to make? I think that I would benefit from that reflection. But I can't do that until I graduate, because let me tell you, this degree is taking up most of my time. It is giving me so much anxiety, and then I also have to figure out how to balance that with this new job of mine. And again, grateful for the opportunities, but it takes a lot of time. And right now is not the moment for me to think about my rebranding or my coming back to BookTube or how I want to restructure my content. Right now, I just don't have the capacity for that. I really want to do it. I really want to work on that, but I just don't have the capacity to work on it. So where are we now? What's the plan? This is going to be my last video for not a long time. I do plan on maybe doing another video or two at the end of the year, just like a final wrap up, as well as like maybe my favorite books of what year are we in? 2022. Which so far has actually been one of my best reading years. I've already read 32 books for the year, and the most amount of books that I've read in a year before is 35. So really and truly, 2022 is kind of gearing up to be the best reading year of my life. Ironically, right? So, I mean, I definitely would like to have a little bit of a video sort of reflecting on that, whether it's like reflection on the reading year and my favorite reads, statistics, I don't know, something like that at the end of the year, as well as like just another wrap up. And I do have some live shows that I want to do. There's a book that I am reading for Bashman Book Club. I'll talk about that in a second, and we're going to have a live show for that in November. And then there's another book that an author gave me, which I'll also talk about in this video in just a second. And I want to do a live show for that maybe in February or something. And I'm actually really curious to see like what the Women's Prize thing is going to look like, so don't be surprised if you see a video crop up then. And obviously I like to do the mid-year book freakout tag, so maybe you'll see that next year. But all in all, you're not going to see more than 10 videos from me over the next year. And even 10 sounds a bit ambitious. Like, you're probably going to see like half a dozen. But I do think that taking the pressure off and stepping away from this platform will be beneficial to me in the long run. So, yeah. And it's not going to be forever. September 2023, you and me, we're gonna have fun. This whole thing is gonna be revamped. So before I go, I wanted to give everybody kind of like a reading update by doing the end of year book tag, which was created by Ariel Bissett. Before we start though, I wanted to update you on the only 2 fiction books that I read over the past couple of months since my last wrap up. Everything else I've been reading is non-fiction books for school, and I don't really care to talk about those. So both of these books are set in the Middle East, so we're going to take a little trip to the Middle East. We have Frankenstein in Baghdad by Ahmed Sadawi, and this is a book about a corpse that is made out of the body parts of different people who died in Baghdad due to violence and military stuff and whatnot. And the corpse, essentially, he comes to life and he starts killing people in Baghdad. Specifically, he's targeting the persons who were responsible for the death of the people that make him up. Does that make sense? Just read the book, you'll understand. What starts off as like justified revenge ends up turning into a killing spree as he becomes more powerful. He, is corrupted by that power and he starts killing innocent people in addition to the bad people. So it's kind of like almost like I guess, similar to Animal Farm kind of narrative where the thing that starts off as an act of justice with good intentions ends up becoming corrupted and slowly turns into the very thing that it was initially opposed to. And I think that this book was very thematically and conceptually super interesting. I liked the idea going on, and I really did enjoy the parts of the story that focused on what I just described. However, a lot of what was important about this book, and a lot of what was interesting about this book, was lost in what I felt was a bunch of narrative noise. We had so many different characters, and there was so many different tangents and unnecessary subplots that really took away from the main aspects of this story. And on top of all of that, the timeline was kind of wonky and all over the place. It just wasn't executed well. It was a good idea, but the execution was just a little too chaotic for me, to say the least. I still thought it was pretty good. I gave it 3 stars, but I was ultimately kind of disappointed because this was a book that I had been wanting to read for such a long time and that I had such high expectations for. So yeah, 3 stars. I forgot to say this was translated from Arabic by Jonathan Wright. So if you want to read more translated fiction, I would definitely recommend picking it up. It's a good book. She needed a little editing. Just a little editing. Guapa by Salim Haddad is set in an unnamed Middle Eastern country, and it is about a young man named Rasa who is living with his grandmother, and he is queer. Every so often he sneaks his boyfriend into his bedroom and usually gets away with it, but one morning his grandmother walks in on him, and that sort of catalyzes the beginning of this story. I'm struggling to find a way to explain this story that doesn't sound cliche, because this is essentially a story about not being able to be who you truly are, which sounds very cliche, and it sounds like every other story, but I think that this book takes that kind of experience to a whole new level. It's a story that explores the inconsistency of the subjectivity, using big words here, of queer people, right? Because you always have to kind of mold yourself into different environments to the point where it's like, what is your true self? Who are you really? Rasa has to live up to a bunch of expectations because of his family and the community that he grew up in, but he also has to live up to different expectations within the LGBT community as well, because there's a whole hierarchy there's a whole idea of who you can and cannot be within those types of spaces. And the whole middle part of the book is a flashback into his life living in the US, where he did his undergraduate degree. And while we're there, we explore his experiences as a young racialized person living in the US around the time of 9/11, having to deal with people defining him by how he looked, and that was not something that he had to deal with previously in the Middle East. So even though he's in the US and he has a little bit more freedom with regards to his sexuality and his queerness, his race now becomes his main defining thing that he has to be ashamed of and that he has to kind of negotiate in this new space. So it's a really interesting book that's all about how we have to shift aspects of who we are. We have to perform different aspects of who we are, to the point where there's no consistency. You're constantly having to define yourself in relation to some bigger system. In addition to that, it's a really interesting story that explores shame and grief and friendship and politics. I related to this character on so many different levels. This story resonated with me on a personal level that I've never experienced before reading a book, and I absolutely loved it. I've never felt so seen by a story before, especially when it comes to some of the things that he experienced in terms of like finding himself at university, becoming involved in activism, and then later being disenchanted by activism. Like, a lot of just what he goes through, even though his background is incredibly different from mine, reminds me so much of what I've gone through as a young person. Yeah, I really loved this book. I don't know what else to say about it other than I gave it 5 stars. It was kind of incredible. It was kind of iconic. I really, really liked it, and I'm so glad that I finally read it. This has been on my radar for some minutes. For some minutes. This has been on my radar for a while. So I'm glad that I finally got it out of the way and read it because it was good. It was worth it. Okay, now getting into the actual questions of the end of the year book tag. This is a tag where you basically kind of like have to sort of think about like what you want to read before the end of the year and that kind of stuff. I have like maybe 6 more books that I'd like to read before the end of the year. I don't know if I'd actually get to finish reading all of them, but this is just kind of what I would hope to read before the year ends. So in terms of a book that I'm currently reading and that I've been reading for a hot minute, it's going to have to be The Book of Form and Emptiness by Ruth Ozeki. This actually won the Women's Prize earlier this year, and I love Ruth Ozeki. Her book, A Tale for the Time Being, is my favorite book of all time, and I also recently read her memoir, Time Code of a Face, which was also brilliant. This, however, is also brilliant. I am really enjoying this book. I just don't know why it's taking me so goddamn long. I started this maybe in June, and I'm only halfway through. Like, what's that about? I don't know. It's a story about this young boy whose father dies and then he ends up hearing voices, and you don't quite know whether that's sort of like a mental health thing or whether it's a kind of like a magical thing or maybe like a combination of both or like a metaphor. I don't know what's going on in this book, but I'm really loving it. I think it's a wonderful story. Is it as compelling as A Tale for the Time Being? No, but it is still pretty good. I'm enjoying it for what it is, but I just don't know why when I put it down I don't feel compelled to pick it up again. The question of an autumnal book to transition into the end of the year with always kind of like, I just don't relate because I live in the tropics, so autumn is not something that I experience. So I'm just going to go with a tropical book that actually takes place in my country, and it's a book that I'm currently reading. It's called The Jumbie Bird by Ismet Khan. This is a Trinidadian classic that you don't really hear about as often as, you know, the books by Naipaul and Lovelace and all these other famous Trinidadian writers. I was really interested in picking this one up because it is about an Indo-Trinidadian Muslim family. Particularly, it's about this boy who has a huge fascination with his grandfather. It takes place, I want to say, in the 1920s or 30s, although it was published in the 60s. And this book is so visceral in its descriptions, in its, you know, just exploration of Trinidadian life and of life particularly in Port of Spain for an Indian family at that particular point in time. It's so beautifully written, and that's why I picked it for this particular prompt. There's like parts of the books where the author would just go on describing random things, like, you know, these older books where the authors had the ability to just like, describe something for pages and you'd still be compelled because it's so beautifully written. There was one scene where he was describing the rain, and it was just so beautifully written. And right now we're in the rainy season, so, you know, not an autumnal book, but a rainy season book to transition into the end of the year. It really kind of fits the sort of gloomy mood that we've been having lately in Trinidad with the weather. So I don't know, I'm really, really loving this book and I'm looking forward to finishing it. The next question has to do with a book that could surprise you and become your new favorite book of the year, that you think could potentially do that. And for me, it's going to have to be another book by a Trinidadian author. It's called Hungry Ghosts by Kevin Jared Hussein. This is an arc of a book that doesn't come out until February, but the author was kind enough to offer me a proof of it to read before it comes out. I kind of forgot what this is about, but it's historical fiction. Takes place in the 1940s in Trinidad, and it's following, I think, 2 families that get sort of tied up with each other, a rich white family and a working class Indo-Trinidadian family. So that sounds really intriguing, and I'm super pumped. I loved Kevin Jared Hussein's young adult novel, which is called The Beast of Cucuyo, one of my favorite young adult novels of all time. I just know that his writing and his ability to grip the reader will definitely come through in this book, so I have really high expectations. The next question is 3 books that you absolutely have to read before the end of the year, and I mean, I don't absolutely have to read these books, but I would like to. One of them I actually already started. I don't know if this was a good decision because it's a really long book and I don't have the time to read really long books, but it's Babel by R.F. Kuang. This is a dark academia book set in like the 1800s. It's about this boy from China who, for some mysterious reasons, gets taken under the wing of this Englishman who, after his entire family dies from disease, he takes him to England and he ends up becoming a student at Oxford. And he gets involved in like magic things and it has something to do with language and linguistics. I find linguistics to be really interesting, and I also have been wanting to get into dark academia as of late, so this book seems like a perfect combination of things that are very much up my alley. So hopefully I finish it, and if I do, hopefully I also like it. I also have to read a romance novel, which I've never actually read an adult romance novel before, but I have to read this one for Bashman Book Club in November, next month. Bashman Book Club, by the way, is a Caribbean book club, if you don't know, that I host with my friends Paige and Linnell. So we're going to be reading this book called Until I Met You by Amber Rose Gill, co-written by some other person as well. And Amber Rose Gill is actually a reality TV star from the UK. I believe she has Tobagonian heritage, and this book takes place in Tobago. It's a romance novel about a girl who travels to Tobago, and she was supposed to go with her boyfriend, but they broke up, but then she meets someone there, and yada yada blah blah blah. I don't know that I would like this book. It just does not sound up my alley, but I've been wanting to challenge myself to read some more romance as of late, and for Bashman Book Club, we like to do books that are a little bit more light-hearted, because Caribbean novels do tend to be a bit, they could be a bit, trauma ridden, and it's nice to have books that celebrate the Caribbean without that. And then the final book that I would ideally like to read before the end of the year, but it's another long book that I don't know if I'll have the time to read, is The Seven Moons of Mali Almeida, which won the Booker Prize just this month, and I've heard excellent things about it. Like, even when it was on the long list, everybody was like, this book needs to win. It's so good. And it did win. So congratulations. I don't know what she's about. It's set in Sri Lanka and it has a cute cover. And yeah, I think that's everything. I don't know if I answered all of the questions. I'm kind of remembering them off the top of my head because I have done this tag quite a few times. But yeah, in the comments down below, I'd love to know if you've read any of these books, if you have any thoughts on them. I will miss y'all. But, I wouldn't be gone completely. Follow me on Instagram. I will still be posting there somewhat. I don't want to say consistently, but I'll be posting there definitely a lot more than on here. Thank you for watching this video. I hope you have a lovely, lovely day. And until next time, because there will be a next time, inshallah, keep reading.